Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video we're going to be looking at a tier list for Daniel Warren Johnson comics. So for those of you who don't know, Daniel Warren Johnson is a pretty prolific and well-known comic book author, like writer and artist right now. He is currently headlining the Transformers, the Dreamwave Transformers line. And he's done some other high-profile things. He's a multiple Eisner Award winner, and he is my current comic book crush, as I say multiple times on this channel. I love his work. Anything he puts out, I will pick up and take a look at. And he has this style that is just like so visceral and so extreme. He really likes the like heavy metal aesthetic and like the big bombastic fights, that kind of thing. So around me right now, up here above me, is a character from Do A Powerbomb, and then on my right here, this is an Ikoria monster that he apparently drew, that I did not know that he was he did art for Magic the Gathering. So now I'm gonna have to go and find those cards and pick them up. So here's our tier list. I recently picked up Space Mullet. Space Mullet released, I think, in late July or August as a collected edition. And so it was the last major title I wanted to pick up before doing this tier list. We've got 7 to look at. 7 titles? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 titles to look at. And these are kind of the more well-known, like the more prominent titles that he's put out. I know he's got some other work as well, but I think we're gonna hit the main points and kind of see the range of his art style, his comic book writing. And so yeah, here's our tier list. So at the top we have JurasSICK, again kind of capturing that 80s aesthetic. I don't know, like he's got that extreme aesthetic. He's I think he likes the giant monsters, and so JurasSICK just seemed like an appropriate one for the S tier. I'm also wearing my JurasSICK t-shirt here, so in solidarity. You can see the dinosaur, very cool. The next tier down from that is Extreme but Not to the Max, which are titles that are very good, very cool, but they're missing a particular element to really get them over the top and get them to that top tier. Below that we have Cool. You know, they're still cool, still awesome. And then below that we have decent, okay, they're all right. And then at the very bottom we have Bogus, which is like, I didn't care for the comic, and I will explain the reasons why if we get to a comic with that level. So like I said, I don't have these in any particular order, and I've been reading these over the course of like the last year and a half, so my memory on particulars, especially with some of the older titles, is not going to be perfect. But I'll give a sense of like why I'm putting them where I'm putting them. You know, I'll give a sense of what's going on in the comic and why it's there. So we're going to start off with Wonder Woman Dead Earth. Wonder Woman Dead Earth is one of his 2 like mainstream comic book titles. This is a DC Black Label title, which means that it is outside of continuity, but it's still beholden in some ways to like the DC line, right? Like the DC expectation, their like style, that kind of thing. The character history, right? It's a franchise character, so certain expectations with that. I'm gonna put this in the DC category. I feel like this title in particular, I don't think Wonder Woman was a good fit for Daniel Warren Johnson's style necessarily. This has the post-apocalyptic, which is a common theme in Daniel Warren Johnson work. So it's post-apocalyptic, it's got giant monsters. It attempts to do kind of a moral of the story, kind of deals like tries to have this heart, tries to have this emotional weight to it, but it doesn't quite work. And the the reasons why are kind of complicated to get into without going into too much of the story. Essentially, what you have is Wonder Woman wakes up out of a pod in the far future, and she is the only superhero in this world where humans are fighting for barely surviving, which again is very much like a Daniel Warren Johnson staple. The use of like swords and sticks and pikes and rudimentary weapons in a post-apocalyptic setting is very much in his wheelhouse. You come to learn more and more about what happened to the Earth, why it was ravaged the way it was, as the story goes on, and it's trying to go for moral complexity, but it doesn't quite hit right. And so that's another reason why, beyond me feeling like Wonder Woman is just not a good match for this style, the morality of it just doesn't quite work for me. The part of the story that's meant to be like the core theme is problematic. So that's why I'm putting it there. Next up, we have Space Mullet. Like I said, this is the most recent read. And this one is Daniel Warren Johnson's earliest title, maybe. I haven't really looked into it, but in his foreword, he talks about looking back at it as one of his earliest projects and being frustrated with some things to do with like perspective and things in the early chapters. As most artists do, they look back at their stuff very critically. I felt like Space Mullet was a pretty great story, a pretty entertaining story, but there were pacing issues, and ultimately it ends up where the found family, the unit just comes together at the very end, and then the story ends. And so I feel like it's one that would have been much stronger had it been an ongoing, had it had a volume 2. This one I would recommend for people who are fans of things like Cowboy Bebop or Firefly, especially. Well, so the nice thing about it is it does kind of have an episodic feel to it. The first couple of chapters are your like ex-space marine betrayal story, and then you go into a like classist conflict story with a cool roller derby setup, and then the last story is the one that really hits the Cowboy Bebop aesthetic when a monster is formed from the uncleaned dishwasher, very reminiscent of a particular episode of Cowboy Bebop where they haven't cleaned out the fridge and they end up having to like shoot it into space because there's a monster growing inside of it. There's like a living fungus growing inside of it. So individual story is very fun. Aesthetic very much on point. I feel like the line work's a little bit more floaty in this one. The backgrounds are a little less detailed than his later work, but it kind of works for this space opera story. Ultimately, though, because it leaves me wanting much more than what it gives me, I'm going to put it in the cool section. It's fun, it's entertaining, but it doesn't really fulfill the promise of the summary in the back saying that we're going to get this ragtag team together and they're going to overcome adversity. It's like the whole story is pretty much that ragtag team coming together and then it's done, you know. So I would have liked more, and that is why it ends up where it does. All right. Next up, we have Murder Falcon. So Murder Falcon is going to go all the way up to the highest tier, JurasSICK. This is one of the titles that I would say, if you're looking at Daniel Warren Johnson and you want to see him at his peak, Murder Falcon is one of the places to look. This is the story of an or former band leader, front man for a band, a rock band, having to get his band together to fight an intergalactic threat or interdimensional threat. And it's got all the same bombast and ridiculousness that these other stories have. These huge splash pages with the band that can basically, like, their their instruments summon giant monsters and giant things to fight for them, and they're going up against these like huge tentacle beasts and things like that. Has all that, and then also has an actual like heart, a core to the story that is very emotionally driven, where the interpersonal connections among the players in the band take the fore in several parts of the story, and come to learn a lot about the main character. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it is something that is emotionally riveting and has a very strong core to it, very strong theming to back up the bombastic, crazy fight scene, heavy metal rock. I also just think that, given Daniel Warren Johnson's style, a story about a heavy metal band coming together that can like summon monsters is like right in his wheelhouse. It fits his aesthetic perfectly, and I mean it's an original creation, right? So this is original IP for Daniel Warren Johnson. Of course, it should fit his aesthetic, but I feel it works so beautifully and is a whole lot of fun. I would highly recommend it if you want something that's going to be equal parts exciting and also emotional, have that emotional resonance, have that weight. That's a great comic to take a look at. All right, next up we have Beta Ray Bill. So this is Beta Ray Bill Argent Star. I have all my comics right here stacked up. So Beta Ray Bill Argent Star, I'm going to put at, I think, here, extreme but not to the max. I do feel like Beta Ray Bill is so this is the second. I mentioned there were two like mainline comics. This is the second of the two. This actually is in the main Marvel continuity, which might be an issue for some readers, because it is coming off of some events out of what was happening with Thor at the time. So I think Thor had lost his power or recently regained his power. Beta Ray Bill's hammer gets broken, I think, and that's what leads him on this quest. So the main narrative thrust of this story is that Beta Ray Bill is having to go find a new weapon. I think he's going to find Surtur's sword, and so that necessitates him like diving down into hell. He's got a sentient spaceship, which has one of the coolest payoffs for a Daniel Warren Johnson comic toward the end, which is an amazing, like, again, these full page spreads, this amazing moment toward the end of the comic. I feel like Asgardian lore and Asgardians as a concept hit Daniel Warren Johnson's aesthetic better than Wonder Woman does, because they have the intersection of like magic, technology, and just like the association of like Scandinavia and Norway being like extreme and metal, and you know, their mythology and their lore being very bleak and very extreme, I think works really well. So the thing here is, I believe, again, it's been a while since I read this. I think without his hammer, I think in the lore, without his hammer, Beta Ray Bill can't revert to his humanoid looking form. He has to be in his like horse monster form forever. And so there is an attempt here at a thematic message of like self-acceptance and how others view you, how you view yourself. It doesn't quite come full circle. The very last panel is very ambiguous. So the last panel is ambiguous for me, and I felt that a little bit problematic for the messaging it's trying to send. I don't know what my takeaway is supposed to be. And I think that ambiguity hurts it ultimately. because I know it's trying to deliver that message, but I don't know what my takeaway is supposed to be. So as far as action and characters and just the like exciting adventure story that it provides, this is one of the stronger Daniel Warren Johnson titles, but without a clear wrap up to the emotional side of the story, it can't hit that final tier. So it's at extreme, but not to the max. All right, the next one is Jurassic League. This one I'm going to put in the bogus category, and I'll talk about it for a bit. So this is basically just what if the Justice League were dinosaurs, and then we gave it no more thought. Like, that was it. Just like, what if, like, what dinosaur would Superman be? He'd be an Apatosaurus. And what dinosaur would this person be? What kind of what kind of crafty name can we come up with for the Velociraptor Joker? And then that's we bank on that being enough to carry a story. Now, I will say I'm not sure how much Daniel Warren Johnson had input on this, because if you look at the title here, we got Daniel Warren Johnson, Mike Spicer. They are a duo for most of these titles, but top billing on here is Juan Gideon, and so I don't know who had creative control here. If Daniel Warren Johnson was just on art and not having control of the story, which would make a lot of sense because it is very much a surface level story. All it is the Jurassic League, the Justice League of Dinosaurs, coming together, fighting each other for no reason, and then fighting villains that are dinosaur themed, and then at the end, Dinosaur Apocalypse shows up, and they have to join together to fight Dinosaur Apocalypse. Except for some of them don't fight Dinosaur Apocalypse because they're too busy dealing with their own like individual villain, which was really, it didn't work. It was not, it wasn't anything clever. It wasn't anything like more interesting than just the bare bones premise. So like, yeah, you're gonna get the Jurassic, you're gonna get the Justice League as dinosaurs, which is cool, and you're not gonna get anything else. So again, I don't know how much control out of it. I will also say there's a chapter in here where the art changes, and it's not good. Like, the one chapter that the art is not Daniel Warren Johnson is bad. And so that also, the inconsistent art also really dinged this bad. Like, it was I really went into this expecting it to be fun and entertaining, and it was just like the bare minimum. I still enjoyed it somewhat, but only as far as Justice League Dinosaurs, the premise alone is going to take you, right? All right, next up we have Dreamwave. I think it's Dreamwave. Transformers, also Energon Universe. This is the current ongoing. So we have this, Void Rivals, Duke, and Cobra Commander. So like G.I. Joe's in the same universe as this. And again, this is an ongoing. This trade came out, I want to say earlier this year, and so this is, still an ongoing story. But just given Volume 1, I'm going to put the new Transformers line in extreme, but not. Nope, not going to pick up that. I'm going to take Transformers and put it in extreme, but not to the max. Couple of reasons for this. This is another instance where there's obviously an attempt at an emotional connection, emotional resonance, but it takes place at the very end of the volume. I'm hoping to see that carry over into Volume 2, and my expectation, if they really want that to hold weight, is to give that some time to breathe and not go straight back into robot fights. The other issue is kind of a personal one. As someone who grew up with Transformers, played with Transformers toys, like the Transformers I know is kind of it's aimed at kids, right? And so this idea of like Transformers like ripping off their arms and like beating other Transformers to death, and like Transformers just completely dying, and humans getting horribly squashed by giant robots, which again, like realistic, I guess, but I don't like that kind of use of and now it's for adults, so that means it has to be like violent, right? And again, I know I'm on a Daniel Warren Johnson tier list, so like of course there's going to be like over the top action, over the top violence, but because of the IP, it doesn't hit as good for me. It doesn't hit as strong for me. So because of those two reasons, I can't put it in the top tier. I'm hoping that they slow down and deal with some of the emotional weight of the things happening. But I've not read Volume 2, and I've not read past the issues of Volume 1. So it remains to be seen if this is going to rise in my estimation or if it's going to stay where it's at. But right now, it's on that second tier, extreme, but not to the max. All right, next we have Extremity. So Extremity is if you have like a passing familiarity with Daniel Warren Johnson, this is probably the title that you're going to run into first. There was a Kickstarter for it. It seems to be what many consider to be his like seminal work. This is another post-apocalyptic story of two cultures that are like in a forever war against each other, and there is the main character is an artist. That is her like destined role, but in one of these many altercations they have, these many fights they have with the opposing side, their hand gets cut off, I believe. I think it's completely missing, and so they can't do art anymore, and they don't consider themselves an artist, and everybody is pushing them to be a warrior and a fighter. This one has it's another post-apocalyptic setting, another not low tech, but like kind of like forgotten tech. They have some like hover technology, they have some like big weapons and things like that, but a good bit of the fighting is still like hand-to-hand combat, knives, swords, axes, that kind of thing. And so ultimately, this one I'm also going to put alongside Space Mullet in the cool section for me. I feel like this one also has also attempts the moral, the theming, and is largely successful. It just doesn't hit very strong for me. It does talk about like generational violence or like a perpetual cycle of violence. You know, the villain characters or the opposing characters come in and do raids, and they do raids, and they all see each other as subhuman, and just like the dad constantly pressuring the main character to be a fighter and to kill and to do all these things. And we do ultimately, this one at least does end with a clearer message as to like the takeaway for that theme. But I feel like this one, ironically, like putting it up next to Space Mullet, I feel like Extremity tends to go a little long, like cycles through the same message more than is necessary. I don't think it needed to be 2 full volumes. Or at the very least, if it was going to be 2 full volumes, it needed to have like more progression throughout. So yeah, it didn't quite work for me the way that these other comics do. I feel like that's where I'd put it. Still a cool comic, still a lot of fun, and definitely if you like the post-apocalyptic Mad Max style stories, or like what's the Fist of the North Star maybe kind of idea? Not quite. Yeah, I think that's accurate. So Fist of the North Star, those kind of post-apocalyptic stories, I think you'd get a kick out of it. And it does have that moral message. It does have that heart to it. It just didn't resonate with me the way that some of these other comics did. All right. And that leads us to our last one here, which is Do a Powerbomb. This was the 2023 Eisner Award winner, and for good reason. I would say that this would be the top tier Daniel Warren Johnson comic, in my opinion. I think that even if you aren't interested in Daniel Warren Johnson as a creator, if you just want to read a really amazing story that balances that bombastic, kinetic, frenetic action with a story with a lot of heart and emotion in it, this is one of the best comics that you can look at, full stop. The basic premise, and I don't want to get too far into it because we will hit spoilers if I go into too much detail. But the basic premise is the main character's mother was a wrestler, and the mother died in a wrestling stunt gone wrong, and so now the daughter has grown up. She's old enough to begin wrestling herself, and she has to do so in secret behind her father's back because she doesn't want him to be upset that she's continuing this tradition that her mother had. From there, we get some revelations about the past, things that have happened before. She gets approached by a shadowy figure and basically is invited to a like Mortal Kombat style interdimensional wrestling match, with the prize being any wish that you want granted. And she wants her mother back from the dead. She wants to see her mother again. And so she agrees to go into this tournament. She's got to find a partner. And so from there, it just gets just escalates and gets more and more bonkers and insane. There are revelations in here that are really not only maybe not surprising. I was surprised when I read them, and that may not be surprising for you, but they definitely add to the emotional weight. And I will say that is really what separates Do a Powerbomb and Murder Falcon from these other titles, is the core emotional weight. The theming of the story is so strong. This has such beautiful and tragic things to say about loss and grief and how we carry ourselves afterwards. So the other thing is, with this title in particular, is in pretty much every other one of these titles, there are these giant, again, post-apocalyptic seems to be his wheelhouse. There are these giant monster fights. There are these over-the-top action scenes. And while you don't have that in here, you do have some of the most bone-crushing, amazing depictions of wrestling matches. The way that Daniel Warren Johnson breathes life into these panels, and you can really feel the punches, you can really feel the movement through the ring and off the ropes, all those things. I'm not even a wrestling fan, and I loved the way that it was depicted in here. I loved the visceral nature of the art. Really brings something special to the comic. And so yes, I would say if you're looking at Daniel Warren Johnson's work, you need to pick up Do a Powerbomb. Even if you're not interested in Daniel Warren Johnson's work, if you're just interested in a comic book that has heart and has a good story to tell and does so in an entertaining and action-packed way, that Do a Powerbomb is one of the strongest titles, full stop, in comics in recent years. So, yeah, So that's going to do it for our look at Daniel Warren Johnson tier list. Sound off in the comments below if you've read any of these comics, if you have a take that's different from mine, agree, disagree, just let me know your thoughts down below. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The number one thing you can do to help us grow this channel is to hit that thumbs up button that makes sure more people see this content. And until the next one, take care.